So I want to apologize to everyone that was expecting to either watch or listen Dillon Vibes interview. I take full responsibility for that because my head was not turned on properly, or for some unknown reason that I could probably try must up reason, but really won't be the proper explanation that I took the folder that had Dillon's interview in it, and I put it to the trash, and I emptied it to make room for his interview that I was about to work on. And as soon as that crinkling sound finished, my heart stopped. My everything just froze. My nerves, because I knew that I just lost the interview that I needed to release for this week, and I I was trying to find any kind of program, and then it got to a point where I needed to ask for my brother Jack Conlu's help because he is a Mac technician, or just a Mac whiz, and we spent the last couple days trying to find it, and we can only muster up the 2 minutes of the first 2 minutes of the interview, and you know I was pretty I'm still pretty frustrated with myself because I I just didn't want to make that happen. I really enjoyed doing the interview with Dillon, and I really enjoyed all of his answers. And while I did reach out to him and see about what his intake is, because he is more experienced in this field as far as just um, being a photographer and interviewer and doing all sorts of media related things that I want to do. Uh, he mentioned that this happens, and he's open to coming back for another interview. So I'm very grateful to him, and to for everyone that's been a fan of the show. I just want to say thank you again, and I hope this doesn't deter you from listening to future episodes. And Dillon's interview was just, he was so energetic. He was so passionate about not just photography, but how photography incorporated into his life. He, to answer the people's nuggets at home that I dropped in the teaser post for his interview, he spent the summer of 2017 in Wisconsin. He did an internship with a mental health institute, and he was able to take photography and take those kids and show them new angles of life, and then just show them the beauty of photos. And then him in turn just gave him a spark to try different kinds of photos. Nature. He's very big in the fitness photos, so to make himself more well-rounded, not just as a photographer, but just as a person that can kind of put themselves in the other person's shoes. It was that was probably my favorite answer that I got out of him. So he again has agreed to come back, so I'm very grateful to that, and I'll look to schedule him a little bit down the road as the calendar is starting to fill up. So yeah, so if you are looking to get a photo session with Dillon, and I'll put a link to this website below. And as far as being a vegan and you are coming to Portland and you need help finding some good food spots, I'll put a link to my brother's vegan Instagram account also below. And it's I'm still frustrated with myself about this because, again, I could always interview him again, but I didn't want to follow the same question and answer because I wanted to make it, because it was so organic. It was so I felt like I really got some things out of him that if I tried to do it again, then it wouldn't feel the same effect. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having the same interview twice because of technical difficulties or just user issue in my case. But I think if I were to do it again, I want to make sure the topics are new, and I want to make sure that what we cover is different than what we covered the first time. And I still have notes about what we covered the first time, so I should be able to avoid those. And but I wanted to give everyone still an episode, and I actually got this idea from my coworker Ben Collins, who's also a fan of the show. So Ben, thank you so much. So with this episode, with the whole podcast, my goal was always to talk to people and find out how they got from point A to point C, with B being, the journey. And I also want to know about their mental strength and how they persevered through some of their hard times. And that idea actually came from a podcast that I listened to called Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum. And Michael Rosenbaum, he used to act on Smallville, which wrapped up its series about early 2010s, I want to say. I could be wrong. And Smallville is a show about the origin stories of Clark Kent, Superman. And I am a giant superhero nerd. I'm just now getting into reading the comics after being a film and TV show fan for majority of my life. So it's been a fun new avenue to hear stories related to the superheroes that I grew up idolizing. And you guys only have this view of myself sitting in this purple couch with a white wall and my lamppost behind me. But if you had a chance to actually take a look at my room, you can actually see that I have some posters framed, both Marvel and DC, because it's the whole idea of superheroes is just what is just so fun to me, because you get to see these people do extraordinary things, and you get to see them be symbols in society, and you get to see them be the I don't want to say saviors, but just you get to see them just do extraordinary things, and you get to see how one situations and times could have changed just because they had a superhero in there. So I know it's a little, far-fetched, but it's something I enjoy, and this podcast as well is something I enjoy. So going back to Ben Collins, he asked me after he heard my interview with Sophie Mashofsky, why don't you do an interview with yourself? And I was like, that's a really good idea, because I'm hearing all these stories from my past. This would have been 9th episode from my past 8 people that I've spoken with. I've heard their stories about how they went from starting to ending, or not ending, just where they currently are. And I feel like people should know about how I got to where I am right now, where I'm talking to you guys either on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube. And this, so I graduated high school in 2010. So I'm not going to go all the way to the beginning, because that'd be too much. But I graduated high school in 2010, and I went from Portland, Oregon, and I knew I wanted to be a Duck, University of Oregon Duck, because I was a fan of their football program my whole life. I remember going to Civil Wars, which now are no longer going to be called Civil Wars. So I went to the games that had University of Oregon versus Oregon State. There we go. And I just remember watching Dennis Dixon's, Jonathan Stewart, and those kind of old school Oregon jerseys, which nowadays they're kind of they kind of calmed down on getting new jerseys every game. So I just remember going there with my dad and my brother, and just not really knowing what was going on, but just enjoying being there at Autzen Stadium. So from that point, I was hooked. Let's rock and roll. And I knew going out of high school my grades weren't where they needed to be to get into the university directly. So I went into the Lane Community College transfer program kind of setup, where I can just get all my generals done at the community college in Eugene, and then transfer on to University of Oregon and officially be a Duck. In high school, my grades weren't great, because I think I was just too excited about the idea of just being there around people, and it wasn't until first year, second year of college where things start clicking. Where if I read this textbook and I highlight things, then oh my gosh, look at that, I have just learned. So the first it took me about 4 years to get to University of Oregon out of Lane Community College. math was never my strong suit, and I always had to repeat math courses like at least twice, just twice. Um, and that was discouraging. That was very frustrating, and there were times where I did want to give up and just try to pursue another form of education that did not require math. But that's impossible. If that math is integrated in everything, which nowadays it's great because I'm not depending so much on a calculator anymore, and I still depend on a calculator, but just not to the degree I was prior to. So I wasn't very happy with how I was handling math, and the hardest part also was just trying to figure out and knowing that my brother is a math. He excelled in math, high school, college. He got it. He figured it out, and I would go for his help, and I would say, hey, I need help with this problem, and then once he helped me with the problem, he would try to give me another problem with similar numbers, and he would say, okay, try to solve this. I don't know why, but I think I snapped. I just wasn't happy with that because I wanted to have it figure out myself, and I think I was just wanting to get it done. I didn't really think about trying to challenge myself and try to continue progressing. I just wanted to get to that stage of figuring this out and then call it good for the day, or just call it good for the term. Who knows? And to this day, I think that also contributes to why I'm a little harder on accepting criticism from my family, because I think in my intro, maybe 2 episodes ago, I did mention something about how they were my strongest and biggest critics, and again, I'm still working on understanding that they want the best for me, and I want to do the best. And sometimes I always thought of myself as my own cheerleader, and I kind of forget the fact that I have a whole family that is also part of that squad of, and I'm just now learning that, and I'm 28, going to be 29 this year, so it's never too late to figure out where your core support group is. And so, yeah, challenges with math. And then usually when people go from community college to University of Oregon, I have this idea of like, oh, I'll get done in 2 years. I'll be at the University of Oregon. I'll be a duck. This is going to be great. And it took me 4 years, not just because of math. I think I was distracted. I was distracted with, just being in a new environment. I was distracted with, in school, and I was distracted with the whole idea of partying. And, college is, if you watch any college movie, you know that they really play up the stereotype of partying and drinking and, smoking and whatever. But I was never a smoker, and just because I have asthma and I'm very exercise and health minded, so I wanted to make sure that my lungs were good for if I wanted to go for a run, or if I wanted to play football with my brother or some pickup game. But the drinking part, I never went too hard on it, for too long of a time. I would drink at home. And as I was starting to get into my drinking phase, I remember going to a party where I didn't know that many people, but I knew one person. So not proud of this, but I would be drinking Ye Olde English to get drunk, because I was like, oh, this doesn't taste great, but it does the job. Let's do it. So I remember I was at a party one time, and I had drank some Ye Olde English, which makes me cringe saying that. And I just remember getting really drunk. And then there's this one time where this guy would, I remember, I don't know him to this day, but he looked fine. He disappeared for a little bit, came back, blood on the face. I was like, what? And I think he just tripped and fell, and that was probably my most prominent early drinking memories, where I was just like, whoa, whoa. And, uh, you know, I didn't drink too much while I drank enough, before I hit 21 because I was living with my brother, and he always kept an eye on me, make sure that if I was drinking, that I was doing it responsibly, and not just responsibly, and just in a controlled area, because I would go to parties, but I felt too socially awkward, which is kind of odd when I could kind of consider myself an outgoing person. I would go to parties and just kind of, I would be the one sitting on the couch, and I'd be the one posted up in the corner, just either talking to a friend or just kind of watching. Um, Granted, now when you say you're watching, it can be taken in a little bit of odd directions, but anywho. So yeah, I tend to just watch situations and just see how it goes, and if a friend wants to come hang out and talk, fine. Or if I just want to kind of just sit there and just observe, I would do that often. So yeah, house parties I was so on, and then I believe my brother, he left in 2 years because he transferred from the Oregon State University, so the rivals, and he only had a couple of years left. But he knew that his degree that he was studying over in Corvallis wasn't the one for him. So he jumped down to University of Oregon the same year that I graduated high school, and we did his ceremony, and he moved back up to Portland to try to get his working career started. And I went from so my first home in Eugene. This is kind of funny. It was in the back end of a parking lot of a Oregon Community Credit Union bank, in the dirtiest pink you can imagine, with no parking spots for let's say people that are visiting, and it was on Ferry Alley. So I was like, that's a combo right there. And it was ultimately demolished after we moved out because they were going to renovate that area. So when we moved out, we didn't have to clean up. It was great. And my brother and I currently live together, and he was thinking that can happen again here because they are remodeling. But I was like, I think they're just remodeling, not demolishing. So I'm pretty sure we have to clean it up. Yeah, that first home, it was, again, back end of a parking lot, Ferry Alley, pink building, duplex, also pretty close to a homeless shelter. So we had to deal with a lot of that. We had to deal with a lot of people wandering into our front yard, quote unquote, and it was frustrating. It was I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel. I know they wouldn't do anything to damage the property. They just needed a place to get out of the sun, for example. But I didn't feel safe to be around someone that I don't know, or around someone that I have no idea where they have been. And that kind of all ties into the whole what's going on right now with coronavirus. But all in all, though, that was a fun experience. That was a good 2 years. Him and my brother and I, we get along very, very well. There were a couple times where we didn't, and I think the first time we hit our little roadblocks was a summer where his girlfriend at the time was living with us, and I have a couple issues when it comes to I wouldn't say sharing my brother. It's just more of trying to understand how he is as a boyfriend to a woman versus a brother to me. So he I don't know what conversations he has with his girlfriends. I just hear what I hear when I let's say just walk through the living room. But I know that he is able to keep a long-term relationship, and that also inspires me to try and make things work. And I think that also seeped into every other aspect of me to try and make things work no matter what the difficulty is. And his girlfriend at the time was living with us for a summer, and we were fine for a while. And then I think I just kind of got tired of being a third wheel, or I was tired of him giving some attention to her when I wanted some of his attention. And yeah, maybe it was just me not happy with that stage of my life, as far as just being single and always running around like a wild child. So while it seemed like, oh, you get to be single, you get to talk to whoever you want to talk to, and all the benefits of being single, but at the end of the day, I've always liked the idea of just having someone I can go, not go home to, but just someone that I can share things with, and I know that the person can share with me. And we had a little bit of a rough patch there, but that was the first rough patch, and we got through it. But so he moved up to Portland to wrap up that stage of my life. He moved to Portland, and then I reached out to a friend from high school that I know is at the University of Oregon, and his girlfriend at the time was looking for a roommate. So I messaged her and him just to make sure that it's cool and all. I was like, hey man, so I'm looking for an apartment. Is it okay if I live with so-and-so? And he said, oh, actually, I'm looking for a roommate for an apartment. I was like, oh, well, look, you and I are living together, buddy. So I moved from Ferry Alley, pink building, to Chase Village near Autzen Stadium. So that was a trek, because I didn't have a car at the time, and I know the bus system in Eugene is fairly good. It's pretty good. It's really good, especially in that area. So I spent 2 years at Chase Village. I created a lot of memories there. I was finally able to get a car, so I was a little more mobile, and it was, I was pretty happy with that living situation. And I remember one day, I think we were studying for finals, and there was a cat that kept coming to our front door. And at first, I was cautious about it, because stray cat could have fleas, could have rabies or something like that. And my roommate was very, he was sunshiny in that sense, because it was an animal that needed help. So we brought the cat in for a bit, and then just gave some food, and the next thing the cat did not leave. Not like in the whole, we put her back outside, she comes back. It was just, we kind of let her stay in the house. Super friendly cat. It was my first experience being around a cat, because I am actually allergic to fur, which I might have developed an immunity to, or just improved on that part of my immune system, because I currently live with 2 cats, and nothing, no allergies. I literally rub my face against my cat whenever I want, and all good. So I was like, oh, cool, sweet. The girlfriend I was dating at the time, she went to Corvallis. She went to Oregon State, and then she also lived in Portland. So I think maybe for a weekend or something like that. I wouldn't say for winter break. I took the cat in. I took the cat up with me to Portland, and we went to a Banfield hospital inside of a PetSmart, and just to get a checkup and just to see what's going on. And as the doctor was doing the checkup, found out that the stray cat we took in was pregnant. I was like, what? Wow, this is awesome. And I didn't know what to think, because I didn't know what the protocol was. I was very surprised. I was also very just unsure, and I was, I tend to put on a face. I've noticed a lot of the times when it comes to interacting with others that I don't know how to respond. I just kind of say, oh, yeah, no, that's crazy. Yeah, totally, I agree. Like I would say 50% of the time I use that terminologies. I'm not really sure how to respond, so I just kind of roll with it. And then the other 50% is like, I actually do agree. I actually do think that, this. So when I found out how many cats are going to be in the litter, I thought it was just going to be 3. I talked with my roommate and figured out what he wanted to do because I think we were about to wrap up on I think we were maybe like in the home stretch of the end of our second lease. And, we're about to go our separate ways. I think he was graduating and I was looking at other apartments. I think this time I was looking at apartments to live by myself. And we didn't know what to do. So once we kind of planned for a little bit, not too much because we had life going on. And I believe, to my best recollection, that it was, I want to say it was a February or maybe sometime early in a year. Like, I think maybe early, I want to say like 2017, maybe 2018. No, not 2017, 2018. I want to say maybe early 2013 or 14. Maybe one of those tiers. It was early 2010s. Let's call it that. The cat gave birth. So we had 3. The cat gave birth underneath my roommate's bed. And as we were studying for finals, or like just studying for tests, like midterms or finals. So the cat gave birth underneath his bed. And this was late at night too. So, I try to go to bed at a decent hour and try to get enough sleep. And obviously, because I want to make sure my brain was in full capacity. So it was kind of funny how it was underneath his bed, and we were just kind of laughing about it because he was frustrated too. He's like, I wanted to go to bed and I wanted to be able to, get my 8 hours and get some studying done. So once the cats gave birth, I believe the protocol is that you don't touch the kittens because then you imprint your scent onto the cat and then the mother will just abandon. So we had to leave the bed a little propped out for the cats to kind of make themselves more comfortable and enough for them to start exploring. I remember I was sitting in the living room. I think I was playing video games. And his door was the one closest to the living room, and then mine was a little bit down the hallway. So his door was open, and then I just remember looking to my left, and I just see the 3 cats start walking out, and I'm just like, oh my god, I'm dying of cuteness right now. They were so tiny, and they're so like frail, and they were so like their meows were so quiet and cute. I was like, what is this? What it feels like to actually feel like cuteness towards a thing or towards something. So we divvied up, or I think we surveyed people to see who would be interested in taking a cat. My brother took one. His friend, one of my close friends, which I'm going to try to get on the show, he took another, and then a woman that I had a little bit of a thing with, but just ended up just turning into friends. She took the third. It was 2 boys and a girl, and I've been trying to keep up with how they look over the years. And the woman, she moved to California, while the brother is still in Portland, along with the 2 brothers are nearby. So that was nice to keep at least them together. The mother, I'm not sure where she is now, but I know that the roommate was the one who found a new home for her. So, the one that my brother took, his name is Quinn, and it's the friendliest cat. I remember I was in college, my brother was living by himself, and I went to go visit him, and I saw Quinn. He just looked so fat and chunky. I was like, oh my god, I just want to hold you. And then when I picked him up, he was a heavy cat. So yeah, it was, I have a connection to that cat, because I've known that cat since birth, and it's super quiet. My brother, he doesn't let the cats have a personal bubble, let's just say that. So he's the way he treats the cats kind of gives me a sense to how he would treat my kids down the road, because it's I think it's fun how to see how excited he gets around the cats, and it's fun to see how um, strongly emotionally tied he is to them. And he's a vegan, like I mentioned earlier, so he cares about the animals and he wants to make sure that they're okay all the time. And it's funny because while he was living with himself, he would go out and do all. He was super busy, and I remember my mom texting me and then just saying like, "Are the cats gonna be okay if he's doing this?" I was like, "I don't know, but I'm sure he has a plan." So I left. Going back to the original story, I left that Chase Village as I wrapped up my time at Lane Community College. It was a struggle. I was exhausted by it. I was just like, oh God, I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to be done with this community college. I want to go on to University of Oregon. I was eager. I was ready. It was about time for me to step into that different situation with open eyes. To quote Friday Night Lights, full eyes, full heart, can't lose. I think I might have butchered that, but that's okay. Intent was there. And so I graduated. I got the transfer program. I got all the credits. Went off to University of Oregon, and around that same summer, I found this apartment. I believe I was taking the bus to Lane, and it went on this main road that went on like south of campus. I saw this house on the corner with a giant tree, and it looked. I would say maybe like 80s or 90s, something like that. So it wasn't too old. It looked good. It looked like it was in good condition. And I saw a sign saying that there's a bedroom available, and so I quickly jotted down the phone number and whatever information I can get, and then I called the number. I think in between classes, just to find out more about the location, or just find out more about the apartment itself. So he said that it's in the basement unit, and it's on like in the lower right if you're facing the building. I was like, oh, okay. And I told my family, and I was like, okay, so there's this apartment, and it's close to campus. It's in the basement though, and immediately as soon as I said that, my mom was just like, basement, not sure about that, because windows, you could just, they won't be big enough though, or just won't have windows at all, so you'll literally be in a cave. So once I took a tour of the place, I was like, oh wow, the windows were huge. It was, I think, about 1,000 square feet or something like that, and it wasn't as much wide, just more like longer, which was fine. It worked because I was able to take the dining table that my roommate didn't want, put it in there, and that's where I would eat or just hang out or something like that. So, I'm oddly interior design oriented, which sounds kind of weird, and let me explain that. But I want to move things in my room. I want to change up the perspective periodically. So even in the current living situation, I have moved things around in this room at least 3 times. Why have I moved things around? Again, I don't know. I just want a new perspective. So I saw this as like a blank canvas for me to change the perspective up whenever I want. And I can change the perspective not just with the living room, or not just with the bedroom, but living room, kitchen, bathroom, whatever. This was all me. I was like, whew, cool, exciting. And so it was a shared washer and dryer, but luckily when you go out the kitchen door, the washer and dryer was like right there. So I was like, oh, this is even better. All in all, I was very happy with that living situation because A, it was me, and B, it was something that I could call my own. And it was lonely at times. I'll admit that. It was very quiet, and I was not sure how to fill up the time or fill up the space. And but work helped with that a lot. School helped with that a lot, and I was able to focus, and I was able to really hone in on what was important and why I was there. It was to get education and was able to be, a better me by being, just being able to be with yourself. And that's something that I am still working on to this day. Just be able to love yourself and be able to be okay with yourself. It's amazingly nice to have my brother here, and I'm very happy that I get to share these moments with him, and especially with lockdown. It's nice to have him around. But when I was living with myself, it was all me. So it was more of like a survival thing at the early stages where I was like, okay, all right, I'm here by myself. I am alone, and I need to figure out how to survive here. And I didn't want, my mom is extremely supportive, and she is always, she always wants to make sure that, you know, my brother and I are both okay, both financially and health wise. So, school wise, I was working at the Qdoba on campus, which I believe I've mentioned in an intro previously. I can't specifically say which. Oh, it was a Joey Rook intro where. There's a Joey Rook intro where I mentioned that I worked at Qdoba. So, yeah, I worked at Qdoba, and I kind of went from the delivery boy for the late night to the manager of the late night, mainly because the manager that was working the late night, her and I conflicted a lot as far as how I thought things should be ran, because it was a giant dude that was the late night manager when I started, and then the way he operated was extremely fun for me because he was very easygoing. He was just like, just don't burn down the store, and we can do a lot of things here. I was like, perfect, I love it, let's do it. So his cool demeanor was what made me have a little bit of conflict with her when she was stepping in, because she was, I'm not sure why. I want to say she was just very by the book. Okay, she was very by the book. She was very, she was hard to work with at times. She was hard headed because she was also dating another manager. At that time. So, she wanted to, I think it was a little bit of competitiveness to want to show that she can keep up with everyone, to show that she can even be better than some managers. And, going back to Dillon Vibes and his ability to see other perspectives and see other angles, looking back at it now, it's admirable the way she operated, because it did rub people the wrong way. It rubbed me the wrong way to make me want to be a manager, to, take that position, take that time slot from her. So it's admirable because, it's tough. It's gritty. It's not, you're not going to win people over, but you're going to get the job done. And that's what's important, just getting the job done. And so, I was working as a late night manager at the Qdoba during my other a year and a half left in Eugene. So I was very excited about that. I was like, this is cool. I get to, not have much of a travel. I was skateboarding at the time because my bike got stolen. And if you are in a college town, especially Eugene, bikes will get stolen. And that's a sad truth. So really invest in a good lock, or lock it up where they cannot get stolen. So I was skateboarding a lot, and even in the rain, which if you're a skateboarder, that's a horrible idea. So it was a quick ride. It was nice and easy, but then it was also dark, because by the time I left, it was probably let's say 8 p.m. because I'd go 8 to 4 a.m. I believe was my shift. And, I made good money through that, but my mom, being the supportive person she is, she still wanted to help with the rent for the place I was living at. And it I want to. I'm not. That's kind of hard. That was hard for me at first because a though I wanted to really push myself to be independent, and b it's like the whole idea of someone else, not my mother, nonetheless, paying for rent. It was very beneficial. It was beneficial because I could have a life as far as finances. I could do things, which is great. I could go buy groceries. I could go to the movies. I could, go to the bars on the weekends when I'm not working. So I was able to do a lot of stuff. So I'm very happy that she was able to help me out. I'm very grateful to that. But it was something in the back of my mind that kept telling me that I need to be able to do this by myself. If I can't do this now, I need to do it eventually. So, it got to a point where I was working that for about, again, year and a half, but that last little bit, I was just like, I'm tired. I've I saw a lot of things during that time, a lot. So, uh, yeah, I've seen students came in. So we were open that late because we were on campus. I saw a lot while working at the University of Oregon campus. Oh man. I remember. So when it gets to working in a chaotic environment, I tend to just zone in pretty well and just focus on what needs to be done. So if I need to go refill the napkin dispenser, that's all I'm looking at. That's all I'm looking to do. If I see some people I know and they say hi, I'm like, oh, hey. And then I just go back to do what I need to do. I remember I was in the back. I think I was starting inventory. And one of my employees came up to me. He's like, Keoni, there's a fight about to start. I was like, what? So I immediately turned into, nope, not my house. So these two guys were kind of getting each other's faces. And then I just told them to separate, get out. And then person was still more furious than the other. So the one that was getting more furious, I told him, leave, you got to go. And I stared at him. I was like, you got to go. Because it was for the safety of my customers. It was safety for my employees. So I was not ready. I've never swung at anyone. I've never punched anyone. I've been punched. I don't really want to. But if it came to the safety of my employees, I'll take a punch because obviously, it's a customer, not a right state of mind. I'm not gonna get in a fight. But if he hits me, then I'll take that because it's for the team effort. So from there, I started dating someone that I worked with, and I did see a little bit of a trend within myself where I do subconsciously find like dating partners at work, places I work. It's really not the best practice at all. It happens, granted, but I was like, oh, what? Do I have a type now? So, so I started dating a girl that I was working with. She wasn't a manager, but she was one of the employees, and I got comfortable, and at first, it didn't start as anything serious, and then it kind of turned into that, and she ended up moving up from Eugene to Portland with me, and that really put a strain on the relationship, and I think that's where I did the most growth. Not really the most growth, actually. Let me rephrase that. That's where I really faced the most challenges because I really wanted to make it as an individual, or I guess in this case, make it as a pair, and try not to let my mother's support get in the way of that as far as making it as an individual or a pair. Meaning that, my brother, I remember having this argument with my brother and my mom at the same time because my brother was voicing his displeasure towards the relationship and how, he was basically saying that, oh, you should live with usually with mom while you're coming out of college, so you can I guess, fix up your finances, rebuild it, and then once you're ready, let's say a year or so later, then you can go and get your own place or something like that. I just wanted to do that out of the get-go. So my first job coming out of Eugene was Nike Portland, and I was like, oh yeah, sweet, I get to work for Nike. I've represented the swoosh since I was my whole life. So I was like, this would be great. I'm excited. I'll get to work 40 hours because when I was at Qdoba, they didn't know what the meaning of, let's say, payroll is or allotted hours. They're like, okay, if you need to work, we'll give you the full 40. If you need to work more, fine. Like the bigger gentleman that was the manager when I started, he's also in a band, and he will need a little extra funds I think he was moving. So he talked to the general manager. He's like, okay, I'll let you work over 40 because you need it. So I was like, oh, wow, it's really nice of him to be able to maybe fudge up a little bit of the payroll in order to help his employees out. I thought it was great. So I thought that same kind of mentality or same kind of build would also be at Nike. Little and behold, that was not the case. So, I remember having this argument with my mom, my brother, where I was like, okay, I can work 40 hours at Nike. It won't be the greatest pay, but I'll be able to, afford rent, whatnot, and then I'll be splitting rent with, my girlfriend at the time. So, that argument was pretty heated, and there were a lot of tears because my brother missed me and I missed him, and it was hard. I don't like raising my voice. I don't really like conflict. I like to hear about conflict, and I'm more excited about the resolution, or I'm more excited about what comes after the conflict is over. So that conversation had a lot of tears. We were very crying and a lot of hugging, and we were just like, oh, they want the best for me. And there's this episode of How I Met Your Mother where everyone has this glass image built up of each other. So let's say I have this glass image of my brother, who is this guy who's very sports oriented, very exercise oriented, loves video games, he's into tech, he's into Pokemon Go. And once I hear that, oh, he was dealing with depression, glass broken, more things start popping up as the deeper the layers. So that was my mindset with this relationship that I'm talking about right now, where I had this glass image built up of her. I was just like, okay, she's very nice, she's very sweet, she's it was a whole lot of things that I always saw the fine layers of. I didn't look deeper down, which it kind of reflects how I am now. Not as far as that, it's just like I need to dig down deeper for myself. So I didn't see it, but friends and family saw it, and they were they told me about their they told me about their concerns, and I wasn't listening. All I thought was that this sweet girl that was very fun and very knowledgeable, mature for her age, was this was my partner or my girlfriend. And it wasn't until some of the issues started getting to the top where I could tell that she wanted to have an argument, or I could tell where she wanted to cause some drama. And I would go to Christmas over there with them, and even her sister and her husband, their lifestyle was just so much more different than mine, and it made me uncomfortable at first. I'll be honest about that. I was a little uncomfortable because it was a very loud household. They tend to scream at each other, whether it's as a joke or if it's serious. Their tone of voices to each other was very loud. So I was very was uncomfortable with that because like I didn't know if they were mad at each other or what's going on. So I, it was fine. I dealt with it because it was the girlfriend's family, so I want to make sure that I was there to support her. I was there to be there for if maybe the brother wanted to talk, I'll talk. He was a nice guy when you just get to know him outside of those moments when they are just talking loudly to each other. And I was in that relationship. That was my longest relationship, and going back to my brother and how he was able to make long relationships last. That was I felt pretty good about that because I was like, okay, cool. I'm finally getting to where he is and how he is able to make all these like 2-year relationships still go strong. And that was my mindset the whole time. And in hindsight, that was not the healthiest mindset to go into any relationship, to try and match any length of time or just try to compete or compare. I'm not gonna say I regret the relationship because that's never true. I committed myself, I loved someone, and I did my best. Mistakes were made on both sides. I won't go into detail on that. Mistakes were made on both sides, and grew from it. We tried things that I never thought I would try, as far as sitting down, talking, resolution, and trying to figure out the issue is, and trying, mainly because up to that point, all my relationships just went into the honeymoon phase and then just done, because I think I had some self-doubt about my self-worth when it came to getting deeper down, and I can't say about my self-worth right now when it comes to that because I'm not in a relationship, but it is something that carried over into the relationship afterwards, or that the next relationship after this one I'm talking about. And it was rough because those mistakes that were made, that were in my head, they were pretty bad. And then again, on both sides, I didn't like the things that I did that made me get to that place or get to that point in my life. And the things she did, I was open to resolution. I was open to trying to make it work. And, it was getting to a point where, it just couldn't work anymore. And, we talked for a little bit afterwards. But it also got to a point where at the work I was at the time, I left Nike, I jumped to Albertsons, and then I jumped to another job at Premier Press. And I finally got their medical insurance, so I was like, yes, if I get hurt or sick, I have insurance, I'm covered. Yes. And I looked into their mental health section, or their mental health benefits, and I decided I was gonna try therapy. That relationship was a whole lot of events and a whole lot of new situations that were presented to me, and that I didn't know how to react. I didn't know how to respond. So I, just did my natural instinct is just to be quiet and just take it all in and then process it and then probably respond later. But once the moments pass. So I wasn't able to respond at the time. And so I know those were things I wanted to work on going into therapy, and I didn't know what to expect, because my brother, who was again dealing with depression, he went to a therapist, and then I know he had a bad experience. And then at the time, I grew up in the 90s. I'm a 90s kid, and seeing a therapist was viewed as, you're crazy, you need shrink, you need help. It was more viewed as an insult. And to this day, I think it's still somewhat viewed as an insult, but more as a positive than a negative. So let's think like, if I were to say, hey, I think you need some help, I know that 90% of that is genuine concern about someone's well-being. The last 10 is probably like, ooh, you did something. I don't know why you did that, but I think you might need help to fix that. So more of as a result of a situation. So that's where I think that 10% comes from. And and I think that I was able to get a lot of issues resolved with therapy. And that is something that I felt the most growth in. I was finally able to crack out of the shell. I was finally able to talk about some issues and finally get things off my chest. And I had, it was, when I look back at it, it was definitely something I wish I could continue this day, but I was leaving. The issue that I went into the therapy for, which was for the past relationship, I felt like it was resolved. I felt like the door was closed. And to this day, yes, the door is closed. But, I kind of wish that I could still see him right now, because he helped me, be able to be more communicative. And I needed to be that. And he helped me work through some past issues that I didn't know were a thing until I said them out loud. I found out that I have an anxiety towards other people's views of me, and I would tell them how, like, so when you sign up, there's a description. You type out what the issue is, and so what I wrote was, my head wants, I want to do things, but my head is telling me stop, and it's freezing me. I didn't know what the word was for that. So as soon as he saw that, he was trying to decipher it. I just told him, like, okay, so this is what I mean. I mean, let's say I want to go talk to this person over here, but my heart, my emotions want to go talk to this person, but my brain is telling me stop. My brain is telling me to freeze. How do you think that person is going to perceive you when you just randomly approach to them, and then when you start talking, it didn't work, or it just wasn't flowing? So we diagnosed me as that, just having that kind of anxiety. And my mom, growing up, she would say that she thinks about the worst case scenario. To this day, she still talks about the worst case scenario. And I think that also contributed to my anxiety. And because now I do think about the worst case scenario. And while that's not a bad thing at all to do, I think that, it does still make me freeze from doing things I want to do, because I think about A, B, C, D instead of thinking of A, then thinking about B, then thinking about C. And, I love her. Again, she's extremely supportive. She wants to make sure that my brother and I are safe and happy, and she even cares about the cats. She calls the cats her grandkids, so it's kind of fun. That, and then my dad, my mom split when I was, I want to say 2008. I just remember waking up one morning to them having an argument, and I think it was about golf or something like that, because he's a big golfer. Yeah, so that argument, and then there was one more that I remember where this is a little bit past that conversation that I just mentioned of, I think I was awake, but I think I was just kind of laying in bed, just kind of hanging out. And then my dad had moved out, I believe, and my mom was still living in the house that I grew up in. And I remember them having an argument about where I was going to stay, like, permanently. Like, was I going to stay there, or was I going to stay there? Actually, I think it was my dad that stayed in the childhood home. My mom moved out. There we go. So, it was, I had a home for both. I kind of split it up to, like, I can live here, and then I can, for like a weekend, or like maybe a couple days of the week, and then I can go here a couple days a week. I remember that argument, and then I was crying a lot, just because this is something I didn't think I was ever going to be part of. Like I saw in movies and TV shows, I didn't think this would be me in this situation. So I was crying, and then I just left. I just went for a walk around the block, and I was crying still, but I was away from what was causing the issue, and it was good because I was able to clear my head, but it was still very hard. I was remembering just thinking like, why is this happening? And it still chokes me up a little bit to think about it, and it's definitely moments like that where I realize that I probably would never have said that out loud to anyone. And to say this on this podcast episode where it starts out with me accidentally deleting Dillon Vibes interview, it just kind of goes to show how powerful conversation can be. And continue on. So my mom moved to, I believe, next to the streets of Tannisbourne. That was her first home, and I went with her because for the majority of the time I was with her. My dad still had a home for me, or still had a room for me. So I stuck with her for a little bit longer than with my dad because she always gave me a roof. She always gave me a room, and she made me feel warm and comfortable. And then when that childhood home was sold and that was no longer an option for me to be at, my dad, he jumped around to a couple places, but it was just a one-bedroom apartment. He had a roommate usually, and I remember him asking me one time, I think I was sleeping over there because I had to take him to the airport or something like that. And he asked me, he was like, why don't you stay with me more often? And my answer was, I'm just more comfortable with mom, and I just kind of left it at that. But in reality, the answer to that question is just that, she made sure that I had a roof over my head, and she made sure I was fed, and she just made me feel like this is the place I should be. Again, no knock on him because he was living his life, and this was, what he saw was best for him. But he was just in, it was enough. There wasn't room for me. There just wasn't room for any place for me to call home when I wanted to, or there's just no room for me because all of his stuff. He's a collector, so he tends to accumulate a lot of things and wants to hold on to it for a good chunk of time. So, coming to that realization that like my mom's going to be the more supporting factor was, it would put a strain on the relationship with my dad. And that is something I am still trying to repair to this day where, just try and talk to him more. And it's a little difficult because a lot of times what he wants to talk about is just like tech stuff, which is my brother's expertise. And now with the podcast, though, he's invested in this, which is an amazing feeling because, outside of sports, I didn't know if we had any other shared interests. Like I didn't know if we had anything in common because, again, I'm not a golfer. I'm athletic, I think, maybe. And I never golfed, but I could do football. I could run. I could do all this, but graphic design is his thing. I can sort of work a computer. So it was that put a little bit of a strain on the relationship. And then also my dad and I, we tend to butt heads a lot growing up. We had arguments where I can't remember any of the topics. I just remember we had arguments and we were just mad at each other. And yeah, that also could be the sprout of the fear of conflict thing. So my grandma, my grandma's, I love her. I had a hard time with her too when I first, because she came from I believe Hawaii, because she was with my uncle for a bit. I could be wrong on this backstory, but I know she was living with us in her first chunk of time in Oregon. So we had the childhood home, and then there was a back kind of storage unit area with a sliding door and clothes and all that. And that's doesn't sound bad, but we put the grandma there. So it was the only place that we had where she could have a spot to live in. So I remember an argument with her where I was just kind of, I was a kid and I was just like, oh, I'm getting kind of tired of her being around all the time and trying to be a grandma and trying to be supportive. And I was just like very teenage rebellion. Yeah, let's call it that. So I don't know what my thinking pattern was, honestly. And I just remember, she was crying because I think my brother and I weren't treating her very nicely. And she was just like, do you want me to go back to Hawaii or Philippines? And I think that's when we started, fixing that issues with her, where, we told her like, no, we want you to stay. We want you to be here because you're part of the family and, we want you around. So from there, I don't really tell her much because English. She's really good with her English, but then there are some times where it's just easier for her to hear whatever the message is it's called Tagalog. So it's easier for her to understand Tagalog versus English. So anytime I talk to her, I have to make sure that it's very clear, it's very concise, it's very, my pronunciation is the best. And when I was young, that was something I did not want to do. I did not want to slow myself down and make sure she understood. I just wanted to talk and then be done with it. So now, she also loves the cats. It's her main point of enjoyment when it comes to my brother and I. She just wants to laugh and giggle at the cats' pictures and whatnot. So, my relationship with her is getting better. I tell her I love her all the time, and I'm doing that with a lot of my family now. And it wasn't like that even, let's say, 2 years ago. I didn't really say out that much to my family, and this is something I'm working on. Not just because of therapy, but because, I just want to be a better person about expressing my emotions. And so the relationship with the family members is getting better. And so during my end of the time with the therapist, I started making another connection with a woman I worked with. So again, I don't know if I have a type, but I think more towards me having relationships with the women that I worked with is just because I think I have issues with trying to meet other people and trying to connect with people outside of work, because I don't know if I'm just afraid to make that commitment of going to go see them consistently or whatnot. But I know these people, I see them, the women that I've worked with that I dated, I know that I see them for 8 hours a day. I know I glance at them and I know that they're there. So it's like, I think it's just more, I hate to say convenience. Yeah, it might be like a convenience thing, and then easier to connect with people when you see them for the majority of your day, every day for the week. So I had a relationship with a woman I worked with, and it was good. It was really good. I made some good decisions. I feel like that there were decisions that I didn't think I would make as a person at that time. And I feel that they were decisions that showed growth from the therapy and the relationship I had previous, because I knew I wanted to be more open, and I knew I wanted to be more communicative. I think I'm always going to try to slowly say that word from this point on. Yeah, it was different. I felt different. I felt really good in that relationship. and I thought I was doing everything right. But then when it came to having an argument or a disagreement, I would then revert back to my, be quiet and just absorb and then respond later kind of mentality. And that wasn't right. It's they if you're in an argument with anyone, you need to be there and present in the moment, because whether it is, you taking that method of saying, hey, you are very emotional right now. I want to talk to you when you can think straight, or just be calm and respond to me in a calm manner. That is perfectly fine. I've heard that method be used. But when it came to me, I had a feeling that they want a response now, and I wanted to give them a response now. So I never knew what to say, though. So that was my issue. So we had a few issues, and then I remember it was a Thursday where I got the text from her saying that, like, hey, we should talk. And I was like, oh, I jokingly say, are you breaking up with me? That time she really was. So the issues that I saw, I believe that they could have been fixed. And again, going back to the always trying to make it work mentality, that was what the mentality was then. Just trying to make it work, because I knew I felt really good when I was with her, and I knew I wanted to make sure that she felt happy, but I failed in that point. And it was back to rock bottom. The one thing that she said that made the most impact to me was that I didn't do things for myself. I didn't make a legacy for myself. I didn't do things that would last longer than me, basically. She wanted to make sure that I was set up in a good spot outside of the relationship, that I would be able to have hobbies that can, that can go back to my degree. She wanted to make sure that I was able to, she was looking out more for me than she was looking out more for me than I was looking out for myself. It was a message I didn't want to hear, because in the moment, all I could think about was just trying to make it work with this woman. And it was hard. I didn't tell anyone for about 2 weeks, because again, she left it as though there's a chance for us to work it out again. There's a chance. But at the end of the day, 2 weeks went by. I text her probably like once a week just to give her space, but let her know, like, hey, I'm still thinking about you. But it all revolves back to what Dillon said with photography, how it gives you a new perspective. It gives you different angles. After I sent that, I was talking to another friend, and he said that, are you sending that for you, or are you sending that to get closure for you, or are you sending that because she needed to hear it? Honestly, I think I was doing it a little bit for me, and a little bit so so that she could hear it. It was hard, because I really wanted it to work, and I put a lot of effort into it, and I'm still repairing myself to this day. But the message that she was trying to send was, you need to do things for yourself. You need to be around your friends, because they are the ones that can support you if you are in a relationship and she's not available because she's working or something like that. And then you just need to be able to spend time with your brother, or just spend time with family. So she helped me really. It was the fire that kind of got all this going. And, I remember in that argument just telling her, like, I don't want this to act as like a motivational speech from her to me, but I think emotional wise, she didn't understand my meaning. Because, I graduated college, and this whole story I've just told you guys, I've thought about journalism. I thought about getting back into storytelling, and I thought about being able to do all this again. I tried a couple times, but I couldn't find the right angle. I couldn't find the right direction I wanted to go.
I love sports. Love it to death. But there are so many sports shows, just like there's probably so many podcasts about mental health, about mental strength, about perseverance. There's probably a million. And for people that are watching or listening, thank you, because it's for me to be able to talk with my friends or talk to people I admire in this industry of journalism and communications and hear about how they got here. It's been probably the best experience I've had my whole life because I've learned to be open with myself and accept people and be able to respond and be able to have a conversation, be able to flow because I'm doing this. And because the last relationship I was in forced me to find new ways to do things for myself. The world right now is going through the COVID-19 pandemic. The world right now is dealing with Black Lives Matter because of what happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd and every single situation that happened afterwards. I took the coronavirus pandemic shutdown, and I am so happy to have said that I was able to change my life during this time by having this podcast, by creating content, by talking to people, because I was in lockdown, because I was able to really sit down and think with myself and be myself with myself, that I was able to push myself to be able to talk in front of a camera. If I were to do this right after college, I'd be stiff as hell. Not like that, but as far as just not be able to be fluid, not be able to adjust to any conversation topics that I brought up, and just not be able to, push the interview in the direction I want to go, but have the pathway to that ending be as windy as possible. So, to wrap this up, I don't know where I'd be today if I hadn't had these experiences in my life. The college, living with my brother, first time, and then living, in the house, going through the Qdoba, dealing with 2 relationships, and then dealing with this. I wouldn't be where I am right now if I didn't experience those moments. So, again, to wrap this up, those really crappy situations that you are going through in life right now, whether it is Corona, whether it is, trying to make sense of what's going on with the Black Lives Matters movement, not saying, it's confusing, but it's saying that, the situation that brought us to those protests, the murders, and the police brutality and all that. Just try and make sense of all that. And then making sense of whatever else is going on in the world. Those crappy situations, they will push everyone involved or everyone that has a say to be the better you. By that I mean you will be the best you coming out of this crappy situation because you will grow. You will become the best you out of this crappy situations because you know how you want to act if you are in that situation. You will know what you want to do when it comes to handling adversity because you went through those crappy situations. If I were to go through, now I know what I want in a relationship. Now I know how to be me, the best version, not the best, a good version, a better version, a growing version of me. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. By here, I mean either listening, watching, or just being you, keeping up on social media. I know that there's a lot of stigma against social media, but it's your own personal billboard, and while that can be twisted in odd ways, it's a way for you to display yourself to people all around the world. So thank you for everything that has happened to me in this lifetime. Thank you to my family for being the support factor that I didn't know I needed. And thank you to the fans of the show and the fans of KC Media, which is KC Media. Okay, quick explainer. KC Media, think of it like the top of the pyramid, and I'm trying to have the Keoni Chats podcast be like one side of the pyramid. My photography, another side of the pyramid, and then the videography on another side, and then the other side. So I will always show gratefulness. I will always show appreciation from this point forward, because I want to. There's no reasons. It's either you do or you don't. Do you want to be a good person, or do you feel you need to be? If you feel you need to be, then you need to just figure out why you're in that situation that makes you need to be a better person. Like, I need to be a better person because I screwed up in this relationship. People will say otherwise, but I know for me, I was not the best partner. So I want to be better. I need to be better. I'm getting to be better, and I want to be better. But if, let's say, my brother wants to be better at, maybe he wants to be better at running. So he should want to be better for him. And I want to be better for myself. So thank you again for listening. And again, I apologize for Dillon Vibes interview. I have him. I will reschedule with him. He will be back. He will have new topics to talk about.
Do you have any follow-up questions for the guest? Put them in the comments below, and I will work to get them answered for you. For more content from KC Media, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And for more interviews from Keoni Chats, please follow us on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube.